Hi, so this should be the last video on the arteries, the circulation through your body. Let's do a little tiny review here. The fresh blood that's oxygenated and just turned red comes out of the heart, and it goes into the aortic trunk, and that turns into the aortic arch. Off of the aortic arch is a big, short, fat artery, so we call that a trunk, the brachiocephalic trunk. But if you want to go through all those arteries, go back to my previous videos on the circulation. And then there's two skinny arteries here. One goes up to the head, that's the common carotid, and one goes out to the shoulder, that's the subclavian. So those are the three that poke off of the aortic arch up there. But then the aorta continues, and it continues behind the heart, and it goes down through the diaphragm, and it goes down the center of the abdominal cavity. So that's what we're going to work on right now, is the abdominal aorta. Now you can technically get away with saying the descending abdominal aorta or the abdominal descending aorta, but if it's the abdominal aorta, then we already know that it's descending, so most people just say the abdominal aorta. Now it splits down here before it gets to your reproductive organs, and it turns into the common iliac. So this would be the left common iliac, and this would be the right common iliac. And it's common because it's going to split into two different iliacs, the external iliac and the internal iliac. And same over here. Here's the internal iliac and the external iliac. And the external iliac is what goes down past the inguinal region and turns into the femoral artery. But we're going to focus up here on the abdominal aorta and what comes off of the abdominal aorta. So first thing, after it passes the diaphragm, the first thing to come off the abdominal aorta is a big fat short artery. And what do we call big fat short arteries? We call them trunks. And this one is called the celiac trunk. So if you've ever heard of someone with celiac disease, it has something to do with right around here. And a trunk, just like a tree trunk, has branches off of it. So we know this is going to have branches going this way, going this way, or going this way, going this way, going this way. So it's going to have 4 branches off of it. So, and we'll get to those branches in a minute, but I want to continue down the abdominal aorta. So this is, let me outline this for you. This is the celiac trunk, and it has this going off of it, and it has this going off of it, and it has this branch going off of it, and it has this branch going off of it. So I hope you can see that. So, going down the abdominal aorta, right after the celiac trunk, we have arteries going one to the left, because remember it's the patient's left, and one to the right. And what do these go out to? Let me get a good color for this. Okay, what do these go out to? These go out to the kidneys. That's my really sad attempt at drawing a kidney bean. These go out to the kidneys. So these are called the renal arteries. So this is the left renal artery, and this is the right renal artery. This pink. The little beans are the kidneys. And so anytime you hear the word renal, I want you to think kidney, because that's what that means. So the renal arteries are just the arteries that project out from the abdominal aorta that go to the kidneys. Now if we go down a little bit more, just a tiny bit more, there's another little nub that sticks out, and on the models I think it just sticks out and it's cut off, so it just stops right there. Now in real life it doesn't stop right there, it keeps going. But on the model it's just cut off, because then that would be too much of a mess of having arteries all over the place. And then down here on the other side there's another little fat, it's not a trunk, it's not a short fat trunk, it's just cut off, it's just snipped off in the models, because these are connected to the intestines, and the model that we have showing the circulatory system has removed the intestines, so you can actually see all these arteries. So, but these go to the intestines, and these are called the superior and inferior mesenteric arteries, and they go to the intestines. And there's like a mesentery is kind of like a mesh. There's like a mesh that go around the intestines and hold your intestines in, so your intestines aren't always pushing on the front of your stomach trying to get out. So these kind of hold if you hold your stomach in and you strengthen those stomach muscles are right beneath that mesenteric, that mesentery. So the top one right here beneath the renal arteries is the superior, and the one out down here is the inferior. And as I said, in the models they're just kind of cut off right here because the intestines are removed. Now if you go in between the superior and inferior mesenteric arteries, you get these long wishbone looking arteries that come off, one on each side. And these go down to the gonads, you know, your reproductive organs, and your urinary system and all of that. So these are gonadal arteries. Okay? Now, all we have to do is go back up to the celiac trunk, back up here to the celiac trunk, and look at these four coming off of here. This top and bottom one are the gastrics. The top one is the left gastric, and the bottom one is the right gastric. However, on the model, you're not really going to see the right gastric at all. It looks like it doesn't exist actually on the model. The one you really want to pay attention to is the left gastric, and that's the top one coming off the celiac trunk. And anytime you hear the word gastric or anything with the prefix gastro to it, I want you to think stomach, because that's what that means. It means stomach. So these gastric ones, arteries, go to your stomach, and they feed the blood supply to your stomach. Now the one over here off of the celiac trunk, this artery over here that comes off, this goes to the liver. And I'll just put liver right there. The liver. And anytime you hear liver, I want you to think hepatic, because hepatic is the technical term for liver. So this is the hepatic artery. This artery going from the celiac trunk to the liver. Now, just like that, On the left-hand side of the patient, there's another artery going out from the celiac trunk, and it goes over here to this organ that sits on top of the kidney, and that's called the spleen. So the name of the artery that connects the celiac trunk to the spleen is just called the Splenic Artery. Alright, so let's see, let's try to review here. We start up in the heart, and it goes up the aorta, over around the aortic arch, down the aorta, down the descending aorta, through the diaphragm, into the abdominal aorta. The first thing we see is the celiac trunk. Off of the celiac trunk, this top one is the left gastric. It goes to the stomach. The bottom one that we're not going to see on the model is the right gastric. It also goes to the stomach. The one on the patient's right goes to the liver, so that's the hepatic artery. And the one on the patient's left goes to the spleen, so that's the splenic artery. Then we continue down the abdominal aorta until we get to these that go out to the kidneys. Remember, this one up here went to the spleen that was sitting on top of the kidney. It didn't go to the kidney itself. It went to the spleen. So that's the splenic off of the celiac trunk. But then we go down the abdominal aorta and we see there's some more arteries that go out to the kidneys, one on each side. So those are the renal arteries. Because anytime you hear kidney, I want you to think renal. So those are the renal arteries. And then we continue down the abdominal aorta until we get to this little nub that comes out. That's the superior mesenteric. Then we go down the aorta a little more, and these two wishbone looking ones come out, and those go down to your gonads. So they're called the gonadal arteries. And then we go down the aorta a little bit more, and we get to the inferior mesenteric artery. And what is mesenteric? What does mesenteric feed? What do the mesenteric arteries feed? They feed your intestines, or they feed the mesh of fat that holds your intestines in your body. And then we go down the abdominal aorta more, and it splits into two. And they're both called, both halves are called the common iliac, the left common iliac and the right common iliac. And common means it's going to split into two different iliacs, the exterior and the interior. And here's the interior and the exterior. And then the exterior iliac goes on to become the femoral artery in your legs, and so on and so forth from my other video. So hopefully that clears things up for you. I do have some handouts on the celiac trunk and the blood circulation to the liver, and some extra circulation handouts with some pictures on it for if you're a visual learner. So I have that on my Google Drive. If you want a copy of that, get in touch with me. Either leave a comment on the YouTube section, or you can email me or text me if you have my number. And if you have any questions at all, leave them in the comment section or email me. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.